Welcome back. So, as promised, today we're going to find out more about plucky Marco Polo. In 1271, young Marco Polo set out on the journey of a lifetime. Instead of having to go to school, lucky Marco got to go to far-flung China and back. How cool is that? Now here we have another traveler's tale of Marco Polo. Marco's dad was a wealthy merchant, and when Marco was a lad, he left him with his mother and sailed off to Constantinople, what is now Istanbul, in Turkey. Marco didn't see him again for 9 years. Think of all that pocket money he must have missed. In those days, Marco's hometown of Venice was a rich and busy port. Marco must have watched ships come and go, hoping for a postcard from his distant dad. Maybe it would have looked something like this, who knows? And on the postcard it says, Constantinople, Turkey, 1267. Dear son, the journey was fine and I got here safely. Sorry you couldn't come. Business is booming. I've already sold a lot of jewels and made loads of lovely dosh. Tomorrow I'm off to China, so I'll write again when I get there. Now, you be a good boy for your mother, and don't forget to go to school. See you soon. Love from Dad. P.S. I'll give you your pocket money when I get back. Would have been nice, huh? When Marco was about 16 years old, his mom died, and his dad came home. But he didn't stay for long. Soon he was off on his travels again, only this time he took young Marco along for the ride. A dreadful journey. In China, Marco's dad had made friends with the great ruler Kublai Khan. The Khan told him to come back soon and bring him some presents. But not any old pressies like pairs of socks or bubble bath that your dear old granny gives you for Christmas. No. The crafty Khan wanted 100 priests to do magic tricks and some oil from a holy lamp burning in Jerusalem. Luckily, the Polos had friends in high places. In 1271, they traveled to Jerusalem to pick up the oil, and the Pope sent them some priests. Okay, there were only 2 priests, not the 100 the Khan had wanted, and even they soon scarpered. But the journey to China could begin in earnest. The Polos began to follow the Silk Road for most of its length, through Central Asia and into the Far East. No one had ever done this before. It was far too risky. The journey was appalling. First, Marco fell ill and had to stay in bed for a year. Then, as soon as he was recovered, they climbed the perilous Pamir Mountains. But worse was to come. It was too risky to travel alone, so they hitched a lift with a passing caravan across the desperate Gobi Desert. Here we have the Khan. Guess he wasn't so happy with having no priests. No, not the sort of caravan you go on holiday in today. The caravan was made up of hundreds of camels, or donkeys, and carried goods like silk. The desert was said to be haunted, and at night they heard ghostly voices and noises like beating drums. Spooky, right? A horrible geographer would say, haunted? What a lot of godswallop! The sounds they hear were made by desert's rock shrinking in the cold night air after they'd expanded in the baking daytime heat. Then again, what was that noise? I'm out of here. China at last. Finally, in 1275, so 4 years later, the plucky Polos reached China. They were given a warm welcome by Kublai Khan, though he was a bit miffed about missing priests. Their journey had taken 3.5 years, and they covered some 6,000 kilometers. Did Marco mind? Not a bit. He thought China was brilliant, and he didn't have time to be homesick. He stayed in Kublai Khan's posh palace and learned to speak the local language. Kublai Khan liked Marco so much he gave him the job of exploring his empire and bringing back news of what he'd seen. It was the perfect job for Marco. So for the next 17 years, while his dad was busy with his business, Marco traveled thousands of kilometers and saw many strange and wonderful things. His favorite place was the fabulous city of Kinsai in the east of China. Its name meant the City of Heaven. Marco described it as a rich and busy place, crisscrossed with bridges and canals. Besides, it was perfect for parties, which were held on 2 islands in the middle of the lake. How heavenly is that? Well, maybe not for the neighbors, don't you think? Voyage to Venice. All good things come to an end, and in 1292, the Polos headed for home. This time, they chose a shortcut, sailing around India instead of going overland. They set off in January in a Chinese junk. That's junk as in ship, not a lot of rubbish. As part of a fleet of 14 ships and 600 courtiers. You see, a local princess was going to Persia to get married, and the Khan asked the Polos to escort her. But the voyage went from bad to worse. Some of the ships were wrecked on rocks, lots of passengers drowned or died from deadly diseases. The Polos were lucky to escape with their lives, but at least the princess reached Persia safely. When the Polos finally realized and reached Venice in 1295, most of their friends and relations had given them up for dead. So you can imagine what a stir their arrival caused, especially when they cut open the seams of their strange Chinese clothes to reveal a small fortune and jewels stuffed inside. Marco's memoirs. But our Marco wasn't the sort of person to settle down and put his feet up. In 1298, he went off to fight the Genoese. Genoese are people from Genoa. The cities of Venice and Genoa went to war over who controlled the best trade routes. So he went to fight them, but he was captured and thrown in prison. As luck would have it, he shared his cramped prison cell with a writer called Rustichello. To pass the days, Marco told Rustichello his incredible life story, and Rustichello wrote it down in a book. The book was called The Book of Sir Marco, the Venetian Concerning the Kingdoms and Marvels of the East. What a mouthful! Even so, it quickly became a bestseller. Readers couldn't get enough of Marco's amazing adventures. There was just one tiny hitch. Some of his adventures were so amazing that people thought Marco must have made them up. It didn't help that Rustichello was used to writing novels about love and all that slushy stuff. He thought a book full of facts would be boring, so he exaggerated things a bit. For example, instead of writing, "Today we climbed a snow-capped mountain. It was hard to breathe and I had a blister," he might have written something mushy like, "This fine morn we traversed a wondrous peak. It was with its delicate dusting of elfin white, my heart sang with wonderment and my feet danced with delight." Can you imagine? See what I mean? So, had all this sightseeing gone to Marco's head? Or was he telling the truth all along? Here are 5 strange things and sights he said he'd seen on his travels. Try this quiz to find out if they're far-fetched falsehoods or terrific truths. 1. Black stones that burned like wood. True or false? 2. People with long, thick tails and dogs' heads. True or false? A white cloth that couldn't catch fire. True or false? A nut as big as your head and covered in hair. True or false? A giant bird as big as an elephant. True or false? Here are the answers. Question 1 is true. The burning stones were coal, which was used as fuel to heat bath water. In China, Marco noted people actually enjoyed having baths. Yes, I know, it's hard to believe. Question 2 is false. This was the sort of tall tale early European explorers loved making up. For good measure, there's also a picture in Marco's book of a one-legged giant which used its massive foot as a giant sunshade. Unbelievable. Question 3 is true. The white cloth was asbestos. It's found in rocks and it is crushed up from fibers to form fibers for making cloth and ropes. It was once used in buildings to stop fires spreading, but it's horribly dangerous if you breathe in its dust. Question 4 is true. This tough nut was a coconut, which Marco saw in Southeast Asia. His report said the flesh was delicious to eat and the milk tasted like wine. And question 5 is true as well. Well, almost. What Marco probably saw was an enormous elephant bird. It lived on the island of Madagascar and stood 3 meters tall. Marco said it swooped down like an eagle and picked up the elephants to eat. Actually, you'll be pleased to know elephant birds couldn't fly. And you'll have to take my word for it. These monster birds became extinct about 300 years ago. One half of the story. You can't really blame Marco's readers if they couldn't believe their eyes. They'd never read anything like it before. Most of them had never left Italy and hadn't a clue about the outside world. But the bickering didn't stop. Even when Marco was on his deathbed, someone asked him to admit he'd been fibbing. Marco replied he'd only revealed half of what he'd seen. And if he told the rest, he added, nobody would have believed a word. Luckily, all that was to change. Marco's intrepid travels had opened up a whole new world for Europeans, and soon after, dead, famous explorers were following in his footsteps. All aboard for some adventures on the high seas.